How did the cool kids from your high school turn out? A stylish, charismatic guy with many impressive skills. He was popular with the guys and girls alike. He was a basketball player, he played the guitar and had a band for some of his time at school. He also liked to act in the annual school play. There wasn't a kid in my high school who didn't know his name. He was a bit of a class clown, always with a joke ready. He dated the hot girls and hung out with the other jocks. He bullied a few kids and even started a pretty nasty rumor about me one time that took an entire school year to die out. He was the king at school and there wasn't a day I didn't see it. After school his life took some serious turns. He didn't put enough focus on his academic life and as a result didn't really prepare enough for college. He ended up going to community for a few semesters but ended up having some trouble keeping up. Now, don't get me wrong, my brother is very smart and can learn or do anything he puts his mind to. He could easily have been a straight A student. He just wasn't interested in it at all and as a result ended up dropping out within a few years. His goals shifted. He made the sort of mistakes many of us do when we're young and he fell in and out of different crowds. He started working odd jobs in construction or painting. He still chased after the popular spoiled girls and only wanted to drive the coolest cars. On paper, it really looked like my brother was screwing up his life. People made such nasty comments and almost took joy in watching the cool kid fail and fall on his face. But I've never thought as much. To me, when I saw my big brother, I saw someone who was really living his life. He had the guts to walk an unknown road, to try stupid things, fit in with different crowds and make those youthful mistakes. By 20, he'd lived a more interesting life than anyone I'd known. Sure, he was making mistakes but he was growing up. He was leaving behind bad habits and he was developing as a person. Fast forward 12 years, my brother is now a stable, secure man, still has that great style, that charisma and wit. Only now, he manages a financial office and has just been offered a position that will put him on track to becoming the CFO of a well-respected company just after his 30th birthday. He has a lovely home, a wife and a happy little dog. He is a philanthropist, volunteering his time every week without fail and he has grown into a remarkable musician. He is now kind to the family, has tried to right every wrong he ever did to anybody and as of May of this year he has the degree he gave up on 1 decade ago. So you see, it's not all black and white. This isn't some stupid movie where the nerds get revenge and the jocks are all poopheads that never mature. Life is a lot more like a slow-burning indie film that tells the other side of a story. One full of mistakes, learning the hard way and of course, second chances. For me, my brother has never been cooler. Have you ever called CPS on your own parents? I've always been a little different, probably on the spectrum, and was never super masculine. My father is a strict, authoritarian religious type who resented that I had a sensitive side and didn't blindly follow his authority. He limited the time I could spend pursuing my hobbies because he wanted me to study and practice piano, which was his passion. He yelled at me a lot, and then would yell at me for crying. At age of 13, I still had a 9 p.m. bedtime, and had to ask to take a shower or get a snack. My dad would get mad when I stood to pee, and often tried to catch me playing with myself so he could tell me it was sinful. He once caught me looking at porn at 13 and yelled at me, then forced me to go to confession. After that I was banned indefinitely from the internet. My door was removed. My room was regularly searched. They found my secret iPod that had Eminem and Slipknot on it, which was the only thing that kept me going, and they told me it was sinful music. I wasn't allowed to have a cell phone or go out with friends because they didn't trust me. I felt so isolated and alone. I started drinking a little and hurting myself, and when my youth pastor saw my wounds and told my dad, he unclothed me to see them and yelled at me about how I made my mom cry herself to sleep. Soon after I came out as gay. It was not well received, and I was told in no uncertain terms that I had to accept it was wrong because it went against our family values. I was so depressed. All I wanted was some space to be myself and some love and acceptance, but my parents thought I was some kind of monster. After an attempt to take my life, I was put into a mental hospital, discharged 2 weeks later, and my parents sent me to 3 more in a row, saying nobody understands how troubled our son is. I kept getting discharged because there were no grounds to keep me, but my dad was paying out of pocket so getting me admitted was easy. Finally, while I was at the 4th one, he told me that I was getting sent to a Christian boarding school in Texas indefinitely, with no access to the outside world, and that a private jet with security was taking me in 3 days. He claimed it had nothing to do with my romantic interests, but the admissions lady I was forced to have a phone appointment with was asking what I had done with other boys. I asked for the number to CPS and called them from the hospital. I was assigned a caseworker and a judge ordered that I had to stay in my home state during the investigation. My siblings were pulled out of class asking if my parents hurt them. I didn't find this out until years later, but apparently they were really traumatized and didn't understand what was going on. My sister has always been daddy's girl and my brother held his tongue so my dad was nicer to him. I was ultimately placed into foster care. My parents were charged with neglect and ultimately beat the charges, but it was really expensive for them, and then my dad had to pay child support until I was 18. I carry a lot of guilt. Foster care was fairly uneventful. I aged out at 21 and made it work for a few years, but financial difficulties along with chronic illness have forced me to live out of a vehicle for the last 2 years. I work as much as I am able and would actually make less on disability, but I can't seem to really generate enough to get out of the situation. Currently I'm stuck renting an expensive vehicle after mine got flooded in December, since I'm severely allergic to mold and everything in my price range gives me an asthma attack. Previously I would see my family on holidays and call them on birthdays, but I have reason to believe they suspect I'm homeless and don't want to deal with it. My family is really well off. My sister is getting married in 2 weeks and I haven't gotten an invite. A few years ago she told me you hurt the family. I love my family a lot and I wish my existence didn't cause so much pain for them. People related to a psychopath. What is your creepiest story? My nephew is a crazy little person. Once, the entire family was playing hide and seek. He was around 9. He didn't like where I hid, so he flew into a rage. He tried to hurt me. I grabbed his wrist and twisted just enough to subdue him. He screamed like a maniac. I released him. He then ran into another room stating he needed his Nerf gun to shoot me because he shoots people whenever he's mad. I looked at my sister-in-law and said, seriously, you're okay with this? Her response was that his rage was my fault. I had no right to touch him and that I should have just let him hit me since he's only a boy. I told her, quite firmly, that if her crazy little kid ever even gave the appearance of causing hurt to one of my children, that I would put him down like a rabid dog. Fortunately, her husband, my wife's parents and everyone else present told her that she was wrong. Her kid was nuts and that this was a serious red flag. Flash forward 2 years. Kid is still crazy, but that's everyone else's problem because he's still just a boy. I'm staying at their house. Things have mostly settled from that prior incident. I wake up very early every morning. So around 4:30, I find myself awake. I don't want to get up and wake up everyone else, so I just sort of lie there and meditate. At around 5:20, the door opens. Thinking it's my kids, who were young at the time and still came to get us early, I kind of just glance up. Then I notice that it's the nephew and he's holding what appears to be an AR-15. Now, I suffer from PTSD from Iraq, so my fight or flight response is triggered. My heart is pounding and I'm basically in survival mode. I wait, I watch. He creeps past the foot of the bed, walks up to my side and raises this rifle up to point the muzzle at my face. So I figure, this is it. I'm going to pass away. Today it ends. The only goal I have for myself right now is to prevent him from harming my wife and kids. He raises it up and the muzzle is a few inches from my face. I reached up, I grabbed the muzzle and I pushed as hard as I could, sending the butt into the little kid's face. His nose is wounded, he's crying, he's screaming about how he's going to end me, how I'm finished. So now everyone is awake. Lights are flipped on and I see that it's a toy rifle made to look like an AR-15. Apparently, this little kid was planning to stick the muzzle in my face and pull the trigger to scare the crap out of me with flashing lights and electronic firearm sounds. My sister-in-law was really mad. Her chosen narrative is that I'm a mentally unstable lunatic who is a danger to all children. She calls the cops. She insists, despite the protestations of my wife, that she's having me arrested and charged with child mistreatment. Police arrive. Interviews take basically the whole day. I'm a little worried that, getting arrested aside, I might not be able to leave and go home the next day as planned because these cops might not be done with their investigation. Fortunately, it didn't play out that way. See, this little kid wasn't just crazy around me. He was crazy everywhere and had been for years. The police had a file on him because the school was required to call the police every time he threatened to bring a firearm to school, which was often. I laid out my version of events much like I did here. I didn't see him and have a flashback thinking he was an insurgent. I saw him, I knew what he is going through his head, and I wanted to try to prevent him from ending my family. They did let me go home on schedule, and a week later the detective called me to let me know there would be no charges. He also told me that his interview with my nephew was chilling and he hopes that my sister-in-law pulls her head out of the sand and gets the kid some help. I told him she won't ever, and when he's 30 years old and on trial she'll be crying and saying he's just a boy. Hopefully he doesn't hurt anyone, but I know the odds are stacked against that hope.